Right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the Reverend Jean Marie, and I serve as the Director for Racial Justice Ministries at Scarritt Bennett Center in Nashville, Tennessee. And I want to say thank you for joining us for another live conversation this afternoon. So excited about this very important conversation. And we got some great women, Black women, on this panel to have a conversation about the moral consciousness of our vote, what it means to go and cast your vote and be mindful of the impact it have, not just for you and your family, but the impact it has on our communities, not just your community, but vulnerable communities that you might not live in, you might never ever go and occupy, yet your vote impacts all communities. And so Black women research shows Black women are the group of people who vote the most and who vote with a moral conscience. So who better to invite Black women to come and talk about the impact of the vote? I hope you are registered to vote, and I hope you have gone to vote. And if you haven't, I hope you plan to go vote this year, because that vote that you cast this year is literally life or death. It literally is an impact, not just in our communities, but the impact of our future to come. And so again, I want to say thank you for joining us this afternoon to be in conversation with us about the moral consciousness of our vote. As we get started, let me remind you, this is sacred space and you're always welcome to join in the conversation. If you have a question or a comment, we invite you to post it on our live stream there, and later on in this conversation, we will engage you with Q&A. But let me remind you that difference of opinion are always welcome in this space. It's okay to think differently from us, from the people on the panel. That's what makes us human, right? But difference does not mean disrespect or hate. So any disrespectful comment or hateful comment that's posted, we will delete immediately. We believe in being co-conspirators to lift up the work of racial justice in this space. And to do that is to also call out hate and disrespect, hate and disrespect. And so we do that in the spirit of love, but we also do that in the spirit of duty. It is our duty to call each other out. And so again, I welcome you in this space. It is my honor, beloved, to welcome and invite our moderator this afternoon. She is what I call one of my mentors. I read an article that says if you are over 40 and you don't have someone in your life that's in their 20s as your mentor, you are behind. And I do not like to be behind on anything. So Lindsay Smith, a beloved friend and mentor, proud to call her a mentor of mine, is here to moderate the conversation. Lindsay, welcome. I'm so glad to have you. And I turn it over to you.
Hello, Charisma. Thank you so much for having me. You said that you're honored. I'm the one that's honored to be on a panel with all of these phenomenal women. We are organizing in all of these different spaces. We have different backgrounds. And I'm just here, and I'm so happy to get this thing kicked off. First and foremost, I am Lindsay Smith. My pronouns are she, her. Super excited to be here. Before we get started on our panel, I'd like to tell y'all a little bit about me, and then we'll go into the rest of our panelists. So I'm currently working in Congressman Jim Cooper's office on an early voting initiative designed to educate and excite people about early voting. I also have a background in working in campaigns and also organizing in the community. I am very passionate about civic engagement and then bringing others into that. My introduction into civic engagement, it was actually the Women's March in 2017. And it was there where I heard all of these speeches. I saw all of these people. It was a diverse crowd and everyone was just organizing. And I was like, wow, imagine if we did this every single day and not just when there's an election. Do you know what our country would look like? It would look like it actually works for us. And while I was there, I heard this quote and it has stuck with me ever since I have been organizing. But someone mentioned that women of color are the moral choice of the world. And I just had to take a step back and I was like, whoa, that is like the deepest thing that I have ever heard. So with framing this conversation, I would like to kick it over to another one of our panelists today. We're going to get started with questions, but first we're going to have introductions And I'm going to kick it over to Dewana to give us an intro.
Sure. Thank you, Lindsay and Charisna. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Dewana Wade, and I have the honor of serving at Salama Urban Ministries. We're a youth development organization, a faith-based youth development organization in the heart of Nashville in the Edge Hill community, which is at 8th and Edge Hill. And Edge Hill has seen a lot of change over the last 15, 20 years. And one of the things that is important to us here at Salama is all of the things that are happening in this neighborhood, all of the things that are happening in our city, all the things happening in the world affect our babies. And so our primary focus here at Salama is the babies. And yet we can't only be thinking about what I call the babies. Because when we think about housing, when we think about livable wages, when we think about healthcare, when we think about Social Security, all of those things affect our young people as they come through our doors after school at the end of the day. And so while parents work really, really hard to make sure that their kids are not experiencing or know what the challenges are in community, our children know these things and our children are interested in these things. And I am like Charisna in that young people, I believe that young people have lots to offer. And so our young people are thinking about and talking about these things with us here at Salama. And so when we work with families, when we are engaging with students, we're thinking about it on a comprehensive level, simply because of all of the things that I just mentioned, because we don't have the luxury, we do not have the privilege of being a single issue voter. Because from baby to grandma and grandpa, grandmama and granddaddy, as I used to call my grandparents, everything that happens in our lives has to do with policy. It has to do with those kinds of issues. And if we don't show up and vote, then we are abdicating some responsibility and we're abdicating our voices. And so I'm really happy to be here with this awesome, powerful panel of women, and I'm expecting to learn more than I actually share. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. We appreciate you. And we will kick it over to Danielle Mcgee now.
Hey, this is Danielle Mcgee, and I'm the founder and CEO of Black Business Boom. I specifically work with small Black-owned businesses to help them grow their business through digital marketing. But I really consider myself to be an advocate for all small businesses. And I think that it's really important that we think about how we vote as small business owners. Our elected officials have so much power over how we operate in business, the support that we get in business, the funding that we get as business owners. We've seen this year with COVID-19 that our elected officials can have a huge impact on who comes to our rescue when things go wrong in the economy as well. So I am here to advocate for small business owners, especially those small Black business owners, and make sure that we are thinking about the things that do impact those businesses the most, like tax reform, healthcare, access to capital, lending from the SBA, and all of these things. So I am extremely excited to be here. Again, I think that it is very important that everyone starts to vote like a Black woman and think about how their vote impacts others, not just themselves or their immediate circle, but how does my vote have an impact on the neighboring businesses in my community, and more. So I am, just like Dewana said, I think that I'm here to learn more than I am to share, but I'm definitely here to make sure that the small Black-owned businesses have a voice here on this panel today. And I want to thank you guys so much for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. There aren't enough women in the small business industry, so I'm very excited to hear everything that you have to say today. And we're going to keep this going, and we are going to go with Dr. Judy Cummings.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Reverend Charisna Jean-Marie, for this opportunity to serve on this panel with so many powerful women. And thank you, Lindsay, for being our moderator on today. I am Reverend Dr. Judy Cummings. I'm the senior pastor of New Covenant Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, located in the heart of North Nashville. It is a justice-seeking congregation, and I've served there for the past 10 years. I am excited to be on this panel as one who has my faith speaks to the political. I'm a public justice theologian who very much ties my faith to the public arena. I am a founding member of the chapter of the Negro Council of Women, Council of Negro Women here in Nashville, a lifetime member of Delta Sigma Theta, both organizations of which are engaged Black women in the vote, people in general, but particularly Black women. I'm also a founding member of NOAH, Nashville Organized for Action and Hope, that seeks to establish justice in our city. It is important for me to be on this panel today to lend my voice as it relates to the church. A lot of people think that the church should not be involved in politics. But when you look at, if you're Christian and you look at Jesus' ministry, then you see that his ministry was very much political. And so I talk a lot about the politics of Jesus. I think it's important that the Black church particularly lends its voice in this space because we want people to understand that there is a God-given duty that we have to go to the polls, not just because people died for us to be able to vote, but because of everything that my panelists have already mentioned about the power of the vote. And we need to understand our power. There's a text in Proverbs chapter 2, 29 verse 2 that says, when the godly are in authority, that means when they're in leadership, the people rejoice. But when the wicked are in leadership, the people mourn and the people groan. And so I don't know about you, but I'm tired of mourning and I'm tired of groaning. So it's time for the church to show up at the polls. Thank you. I look forward to our conversation on today.
Yes, absolutely. It's Sunday, and I just got another sermon. I'm so thankful for those words. Super excited for this panel. And I just see Alora with the snaps, and that's great. A great transition. We're going to kick it over to you. And if you could tell everyone your unique perspective. All right, here we go.
Everyone. My name is Alora Young. I'm the Youth Poet Laureate of Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm 17 years old, so I can't actually vote. And I think that provides a unique perspective to this conversation in that I hope I can serve as a reminder that you should vote as if history is watching you. Because me and all the people in my generation who are writing those history books, we're right here and we see everything you're doing. And we hope that you will vote with our best interest in heart because we can't make those choices for ourselves at this current moment in time. I also run a nonprofit that works with children in Nashville. It's called Above Ground. We're in the process of incorporating to become an official nonprofit. And we teach Black history and creative writing and other arts in the hopes that we can encourage children to be politically active and aware of their culture, as well as pursue the arts and advanced academics. And I think working with children has taught me that they see far more than you could ever think they do. And you should vote like your children are watching you, because I promise they are. Thank you.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for that. And also, I just wanted to share everyone, Laura is a walking testament. Even if you cannot participate in our democratic process at the moment, there's still so much that you can be doing to get involved. And with that, speaking of someone who is so involved, we have Tamika here who will speak next. I admire her and her work. The past few days, like she's just been out in the community every single day, just hitting the pavement. So we're so excited to hear from your perspective. If you'd like to kick it on over and tell us about yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here on this wonderful Sunday afternoon. For those of you who do not know me, I am Tamika White, and I serve as the volunteer coordinator and statewide organizer for the Equity Alliance. As a staff member at the Equity Alliance, I handle all things related to voting and civic engagement, whether it's trainings, registration, education, as well as turnout. Alora spoke a little bit about them watching us. And when I was asked what voting means to me, or why do I vote? And my response was, I want the children to know that I cared enough about them while I was voting, because they can't. For the least, we vote for the least of the few. Those children have their whole lives ahead of them, and they're counting on us. So that's why I go to the polls. Grassroots organizing in our communities is extremely important. You must meet the people where they are. Organizing in our communities is my priority, because often they are left behind and overlooked. And if you do not know, when it comes to voting, those are the pockets of voters that make a difference in our election. So it's my duty to make sure that we engage all of them and turn them out to the polls.
Yes, absolutely, Tamika. Thank you so, so much. We are very excited for this. And we're gonna start with our questions, but to start it out, y'all have heard we have perspective in family background, religious and faith, small business, youth, and organizing. So we're bringing all of this together to tell you why women of color are the moral compass. So just revisiting that idea, because it's truth be told, Black women are the most reliable voting bloc. We're also the smartest demographic. There you go, snaps to us. So we're just gonna kick it off with a question. And as we approach Election Day, this is, again, an intergenerational conversation. And this is just basically all of us speaking and giving our perspectives. But, as we approach Election Day, we want to know why. Why should we vote with a conscious impact? Why should individuals vote like they have vulnerable communities to protect? Why should people care about the Black agenda? And why should voters care about communities beyond their reach? With the family perspective, I'd like to kick it off with that, and then also go to Alora, because you said we need to vote like our kids are watching, and that just automatically ties in together. So if we could start it out with you two.
Certainly. Thanks for that question. It's a hard one. Like I said earlier, we just don't have the luxury of being a single issue voter, simply because from a family perspective, again, we're talking basically the womb, I hate to say it like this, to the tomb. But it is important for us to think about others, especially because of the time that we're in right now. I recognize that there is so much more angst and anger and individualism in this world. And so we talk a lot about being self-made. A lot of people talk about being self-made, and I did all this on my own. And we, especially women, know those things to be untrue. There's nothing that I have accomplished. There's nothing that all of you powerful women on this panel have accomplished in and of yourself. And we're not even speaking about your religion, your faith. We know that that's an undergirding. But all of the things that have happened to and for us have happened because of other people. And so for us to get to a point where, we pop in our own collar and we're talking all of this stuff about how we did it ourselves, it's disingenuous and it's ultimately selfish, right? And so when we were in kindergarten, we learned to share. When we were at home and had siblings, our parents and grandparents told us that if you were an older sibling, your younger sibling had to go with you wherever you went, and you had better take care of them. And so how we've gotten away from that in this political world is really challenging to me, because every decision that we make, everything that we're thinking about and talking about, down to the dog catcher, down to school board members, down to what we think might be the most minute thing that doesn't have anything to do with anything, is connected to something. And so when we think about the world and we think about our community, and I think about my household, I have to think about how Nathan shows up in a classroom, my son, who's old and crusty by now, but when he showed up in a classroom, I needed to know that the people whose other children were in that classroom cared about what happened to my son. And I can only do that if I take the time to care about what happens to their son. And so my hope, and this is almost Pollyanna-ish, but my hope is that we can begin to build on that kind of care in community that allows us to pay attention to, well, it's not my problem. Well, it's not my job that's being affected, but tomorrow it really could be. And so it is important to me that we begin to change the tenor of how we show up in community relative to, it's not just all about me. Thanks.
I love that. Absolutely. And what you said, it's not just about me. Laura, I'm going to target you here for a second because you are 17. You cannot vote yet, but you took it upon yourself to get involved and do whatever you could. Could you give us more, like, why are you so involved? Tell us how that affects you.
Okay. I think about life in the world this way. Every time you read a history book and you look at those people who were doing horrible things, who were enslaving people, who were ignoring what was happening in Germany during the World War II, you look at them and you think, how could they have done that? But then when you're faced with situations in your own modern day where the same things are happening, you are being given the opportunity to do what you say they should have done during all of these time periods in history. And I feel that despite my not being able to make a change from a voting standpoint, there is no logical reason for me to not do everything I possibly can to make a change in any other avenue that I have available to me. I'm an artist. I can change minds through poetry. I can do all of this stuff. I can work with kids younger than me to encourage the younger generation to have a different sort of perspective on the world that will hopefully lead to them not having to face these situations in the first place. And there's this really interesting psychological phenomenon called the Kohlberg scale of morality, which says that over the course of your life, you have the potential to develop to different stages of morality. And most people, their level of morality stopped at about stage 4. And that's what the law tells you is moral or amoral. So we as a people, you as a people who can vote, have the right to pick people who will make laws that will guide people towards a stronger moral compass. And even though I can't do that, I can change people's minds to guide them towards that and hopefully encourage them to grow their own stronger moral compass at higher levels where they continue to develop into someone who thinks with a greater universal compassion. So yeah.
I love how you said that we have the power to change that. And speaking of power, I think of the community that is always at the forefront of every single social justice movement, and that is our faith-based groups. Specifically in Nashville, we have had faith organizations and congregations come together and lead the pack. So Reverend Dr. Judy Cummings, if you would like to shed light on this and talk about it from a faith perspective, we would love to hear it.
Thank you. And thank you all for your answers. I'm learning so much. You know, as a pastor, I am invited into the most vulnerable, the most intimate settings of people's lives. And to this end, I know firsthand just how our people are hurting, just how disenfranchised and how marginalized our people are, and how this disenfranchisement impacts every area of their lives, of the lives of BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color. You know, and this disenfranchisement, we have to understand, is directly connected to policies and laws that are passed in the House of Congress. And these policies and laws are not in our best interest. And so that's why we must get to the polls. As a matter of fact, when I was asked to submit my statement about why voting is so important, and as I thought about it, you know, as our nation remains entrenched in structural racism, which continues to corrupt American democracy and to preserve that racial inequality, my statement is this: our democracy is in chains. And it is the power of the vote that is going to break those chains. You know, if you don't vote, you really don't have power. You really cannot complain when laws are passed that are not in our best interest. And so we have to, the church has to be on the forefront of justice, to tell people this is where your power lies. This is where how God gives us the power. When Jesus came, and this is my faith tradition that is talking, Jesus came to overturn the democracy that was there in place, overturn the empire that was there in place that was oppressing people. It is our vote that will overturn the oppression that is oppressing our people and keeping our democracy in chains. And so, I'm a trained community organizer, and I know the policy, I know the laws that are just not in the best interest of our people. And we've got to vote for people who will go and represent our causes, represent who we are and what is important to us.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I'm just blown away by that. And you talked about organizing, and now I want to kick it over to Tamika, because I know that you come from that organizing background, and you definitely, like, you talk to voters head on, and you're like, okay, like when you're out there convincing them to go out and do their civic duty, can you tell us, like, why is it so important for everyone to not just care about themselves and for us to vote with a moral compass?
It's definitely a critical time right now. And when we're out in the communities, registering people and explaining to them, well, let me stop, because we're in those communities, and we're in the communities where people have not been listened to. We're in those communities that people have been overlooked. We're in those communities where people don't believe that their vote matters or their vote counts, or why should I vote? They're just going to do what they want to do anyway. So every day, trying to convince a disenfranchised voter why it's important for you to get restored, or someone who has tried to register but was unsuccessful because we live in a voter suppression state and it's not as easy as we thought to register someone to vote. We just cannot afford to not think about others. We should care about communities and people beyond, in those communities that are beyond our reach, because everything that they experience, we experience, whether it be directly or indirectly. At the ballot box, when it comes to taxes, crimes, and the list can go on. So as Dewana said earlier, it is our problem, and it's our job to make sure that we organize and get those people to the polls.
Absolutely, absolutely. And since we are talking about Tennessee, and you said we're a voter suppression state, I know that the Equity Alliance has been targeted. For the people in the audience that are not aware of this, could you shed a little bit of light on how the state has tried to target the Equity Alliance and Black and Brown voters?
Well, sure. Of course, I can shed a little bit of light on that. So the Equity Alliance and other sister partner organizations were targeted by Secretary of State Trey Hargett in 2018, after we registered over 98,000 people to vote across the state, Black and Brown people at that. So I don't think they like that. And it was given an opportunity for us to go out in the community all over the state and register those people. And we did it. And I think that Tennessee has to do a better job about making it easier for us to vote. They create these laws every day. They sit in the state legislature and create laws that prohibit people from living a normal life, whether it be healthcare or voting rights. Those things are very important to all of us. So we just have to make sure that we are definitely also putting the right people in those seats to make sure that we get the things that we need in the community.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that and sharing that with the audience for those that did not know. So revisiting the question about how like Black women do not vote with individualism in mind, I'd like to focus on small businesses. There's not enough Black women in this in this category. And I would like to know, Danielle, could you tell us, why should someone who is not a small business owner, why should they care? Why should they care about all of this?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, small businesses drive America. We are literally the economic engine of America. There are 30 million small businesses. They're employing half of America. So why wouldn't we think of the 30 million small businesses that are employing half of American citizens? I think that also, as we look at Black women in this space and look at how Black women cannot go out and start. We are starting businesses, but our businesses are disenfranchised. We don't have the capital that our counterparts have. We can't just go out and raise money like a white male could do, or even a male of color could do. And again, the people who are our elected officials, they control the policies that can make it easier for us to be able to go out and raise money for our businesses. I think that it's really, I was honestly shocked and never really thought about the fact that everyone wasn't voting in this space. Like, I never really thought about the fact that everyone didn't care about everybody. It's just how I've always been. And I think we hear a lot of times as Black women that we're expected to come and save everybody. And I've heard that a lot more this year. And I didn't really think about it from the perspective of voting. And again, I think that it's really important that we start to think about, how do we get our counterparts to see that every decision that they make when they vote, it impacts us all. And again, I just don't see how people do not get that and why it's not important. So it was really interesting just thinking about this panel, because I just hadn't realized that everyone wasn't voting with a moral compass. I didn't really realize that we didn't care about our neighbors. And it really is a very simple way to think about things, to honor your neighbor and to love your neighbor. I care about small business owners that I've never met. I've never met them before. I've never set foot in their business. Whether they survive or not doesn't impact my pockets, but I still care about them. And I think that it's just important that we have these conversations so that we can start to get others to do the same.
Yes, absolutely. And with that, I'm going to transition into, why should the middle class care about the poor? We can talk about this from a family's perspective and also small business perspective.
So the middle class, does it even exist anymore? I mean, really, as we think about the 1% and the 99%, right? Because the rest of us outside of the 1% are either middle class today, potentially not tomorrow, or not at all today and living the illusion that we are. And so we have lots and lots of families that are doing their level best to show up in the world, in this capitalistic country that we live in, and show up in ways that say, I am valuable. And the unfortunate thing in our country is that value is placed on things that are not internal. They're placed on things that are external and are shallow. And what house do you live in? And what school district are your children going to? And all of those kinds of things. And on top of that, all of those things also still have value, right? So my zip code makes determinations about where I live. And if I live in a middle class zip code, then I have a better chance of having my children go to a better school, even though I may be underwater living in my middle class household. And so when we think about everything that there is for us to vote on relative to the specific people that get in office, they vote on it all. They vote on property taxes. They vote on the district lines. They vote, then have gerrymandering that makes our vote less powerful in the state. They vote on or against livable wages. They vote on or against things that happen right here in our city. And then the state legislature can come around and say, well, no, y'all talking about too much equity down there. Y'all talking about way too much equality down there. We're gonna go ahead and strike that out. And so the middle class should care about other folks because we're all the 99%. So my middle class expectation of how I show up is no different. I am no different than a mom who lives in a zip code that is clearly considered not middle class. And so we're talking about and dealing with the same issues. I want my child to do well in school. I want to be able to take my child to a hospital, to a doctor that I can afford to pay for, and it's going to give us good quality health care. I want my child to be able to go to college and not be unable to purchase their own home because of the student loans that they have had to get in order to be able to get a degree that makes them more marketable, that makes them a candidate to be middle class. When we all are operating 1 to 2 paychecks, not all, but a lot of us are operating 1 to 2 paychecks away from being below the middle class standard. And so it's just important because I heard this statement, and I probably was new to hearing it 10 years or so ago when I heard it, but a rising tide lifts all boats. I used to believe that, but the tide has risen even in the midst of this pandemic for Jeff Bezos, for Zuckerberg, and for all of those 1%ers. Their tide has lifted and ours has not. Our tide has gone out. And so it's important that the middle class think about other people because we are all each other, plain and simple. And so while we're talking about the Black women vote today, I want to give honor, support, and props to the other pieces that go along with it, right? Because the things that happen with voting don't just happen with voting. It goes back to what Tamika was talking about, the organizing in communities. Judy talked about being an organizer. We're all organizers in our little neck of the woods, even though we don't necessarily consider ourselves so, because we do have to get out there and talk to the folks who say, my vote doesn't count. And then we begin to have a conversation that helps us who are proponents of voting to have a better idea as to how we can help them think differently about it. And they sometimes can help us think differently about it as well. And so I am my middle class or my non-middle class sister or brother. And that's to me the reason we need to be thinking about other folks' areas of impact.
That was so beautifully said. And also for the other panelists, we can just, if you have something to add to that, you can just chime in. Reverend, I saw you nodding your head a lot. Would you like anything to add there?
I don't have anything to add. Dawana and Tamika were just outstanding. But I'm a preacher, so I can always say something, right? But the vote impacts all of us, no matter what class you find yourself in. And I know we're probably going to get to this later, but I was thinking, even as Dawana was talking, about our public school system. So we vote to raise the property taxes, but it really impacts all of us because we want every child to be educated, because when you have an educated society, then you have less violence, more people are homeowners, all that. So it may not be anymore, Dawana, as you said, that the rising tide, everybody rises, but certainly without it, we all fail. So thank you for sharing that perspective.
So I kind of want to frame it into why should voters that are not Black care about the Black agenda? We talk about how Black women are like the saviors. Everyone's like, oh, Black women have got this, blah, blah, blah. Well, wait just a minute. We need everyone. So why should, and this is open to everyone, why should voters care about the Black agenda? I'm going to kick it to Alora.
Hello. So that's a very difficult question. But I think that we as a society sort of struggle with the notion of individuality as a positive thing, as opposed to collectivism as a mindset that uplifts society, because as people who live in a capitalist society, individualism is encouraged, despite the fact that more often than not, individualism is detrimental to people who are not at the top of the sort of functional capitalist machine. And I think that people say, oh, I don't need people who are not people of color feel they may not need to care about the issues facing Black people because they feel like it will never come back to impact them. However, legislation that majority affects the Black people will come to affect everyone, and that when Black people are the majority in poverty, people who are not people of color will make legislation keeping them down. And then when things like recessions happen, those legislations they voted for to keep Black people down are going to in turn hurt them. So even if you think of this from a purely selfish point of view, it still serves you to uplift the bottom of your community so that when bad things like the coronavirus happen, you are not sent down to where you keep people who are generally oppressed. And I think there's a really interesting thing that's in the Constitution, and it's the government derives their just power from the consent of the governed. And should any form of government become destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Therefore, if you consistently take power away from the people, when the government eventually, if it ever happens, starts to negatively impact you, you will have taken away your ability to fight back against it by voting against minorities instead of voting for an entire populace as a collective. So yeah.
So I'm not trying to, go ahead, Lindsay, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, wow, like that was so powerful. I just, we all said that, like, we're also learning from each other on this call, and wow, that was an entire sermon. I'm blown away. But I'll kick it over to you.
So one of the most challenging things for me is we recognize as Black people that there is and needs to be a Black agenda. There needs to be a focus on issues that are concerning us. But when we talk about why should white people care about it, because 8 times out of 10, and these are my own numbers, 8 times out of 10, they're voting against their own personal interests anyway. So these jokers who are running around talking about, we got to get rid of that doggone Obamacare. I'm so glad I have that ACA. Come on now. You are benefiting from the exact same things that we as a people are simply saying, Ubuntu, right? When I do well, everybody does well. We do well together. And so these folks don't seem to understand that they're voting against their own interests. They're voting against a livable wage for themselves and their children. They're voting against good quality health care. They're voting against when they happen to live in oppressed situations and trailer parks and can't afford to live right here in Nashville and have to move to other counties and things. They're voting against the things that will make their lives better where they are. But the unfortunate thing is that oftentimes people want to have someone else to quote unquote look down upon. It makes them feel better about their lot in life. And so my thing is, I want my lot in life to be like the 1%'s lot in life and not at the expense of other people. And so why should a white person care about the Black agenda? Because doggone it, it's a human agenda, period. It's a human agenda. And so when we're talking about the Black agenda from our perspective, my belief is we're talking about it relative to the inequity. We're not talking about it as in just give us good stuff. Give us the equitable stuff. Give us the equitable stuff, the equitable opportunity, et cetera, that you think that you have. But in essence, you really don't, because you happen to be in the same boat with all the other 99%ers. So it's distressing to me when we think about how these folks are voting for candidates who do not have their best interests at heart, but only have the candidates and other people like the candidates' best interests at heart. And Laura, I love you. You keep raising your hand. I just love you. Thank you for being so sweet.
Can I say something else? Is that allowed? Okay, it's a function of white supremacist brainwashing that America has done to its people, that they would prefer to keep themselves oppressed and minorities oppressed as opposed to lifting them all up. It's actually been observed in places like Scandinavia, where when they were ethnically homogenous, they were very, very likely to have really good social services to uplift people in poverty and to house the homeless and to do all of these great things. But when there started being an influx of immigration, white supremacist brainwashing that had been done. And because it was ethnically homogenous, it wasn't affecting anybody. But with the influx of immigrants during the Syrian crisis, they started going against their own social policies that had built them up to such an amazing, like, what we consider a pinnacle of socialist, like, marketing today. And therefore, it's actually been observed in multiple different countries that it is not a function of self-service that people vote against their own interests, but a function of racism. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking now.
And may I just chime in? And Laura, you are absolutely right. And when you talk about white supremacy ideologies that have brainwashed people, I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, the book came out, Dying of Whiteness. And in that book, written by a local physician here at Vanderbilt, talked about why would people vote against their own self-interest in terms of healthcare, particularly when they themselves were actually literally dying. And so brainwashed with white supremacy are these people that when they interviewed this one guy who I believe, if I'm correct, he had either liver cancer or kidney cancer and was literally dying, he said, I would rather die than to see a Black person benefit from any of my tax dollars. And basically he was talking about the Affordable Health Care Act. And so it is entrenched in this country, and this country we know is built on white supremacy. So when you talk about the Constitution, Laura, you're talking about a white supremacist document that is in place that holds this country, that is literally the structure of this country and runs every system that we will talk about today as it relates to the power of the vote. So that's why we have got to carry our BIPOC behinds to the polls, because we have got to have people who have the same self-interest that we have, who are going to pass legislation and pass policies that are good for our people. They've done it all of these years. It is time for us to do it and to demand that the people who we send to the Hill, or particularly local politicians, demand that they are there to represent the interest of BIPOC people. And you're correct, whoever said it, when Black, Indigenous, people of color, when policies are passed for us, they benefit. White people benefit. So they need to be interested in the Black agenda. They might want to see the Black agenda be passed.
Oh my goodness, that entire sermon. And I'm so happy that you said that. I want to start kicking it to the second part of this panel. So we actually have the opportunity right here and now to take our power back. Early voting is underway all across the United States. But voting looks a little different this year. We are currently in the middle of a pandemic that has already killed 200,000 plus people and counting. It is growing. We have some leadership that have different policies in place. We're not sure how much longer we're going to be in this. And now we have one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime coming up. So everyone, if you would like to chime in, you can give us your thoughts on voting on the ballot and preparation for it, specifically in Tennessee. You know, early voting kicked off Wednesday, October 14th. We've already been through the first 4 days of early voting, and we are seeing turnout in numbers. So my question I pose to you is, why is it so important that people do make a plan to vote early? Why is it important for people to educate themselves before they go out to the ballot box? And also, why is it important for us to not just know what's on the ballot, but also to bring in our communities and our families and our friends and have them actually go out and vote with us? So Laura, you can unmute.
I feel like I'm talking too much. I'm sorry, but I have something to say. Okay, I wrote a poem about this. And there's this one line in my poem that I feel like really summarizes my thoughts about why you have to vote. If words are bullets, then your ballot is a semi-automatic. It's the way your voice can shoot through the silence and the static. If the sealing of your lips is far more than systematic, look back at all the women who wielded their weapons for you. And basically, what I'm trying to say in that poem is your vote is the weapon against tyranny that you have been given by the fight your ancestors fought for generations. My great-great-grandmother was literally enslaved. She could not vote. Her daughter marched for white women to have the right to vote, and she didn't get that right to vote. And then her daughter marched so that they could finally have that right. This is a battle. This is a weapon that it took 400 years for your people to get. This is a battle your children are still fighting against voter suppression, that your children are still fighting against voter disenfranchisement of people who have been convicted of felonies due to the way that people are consistently arrested for minor crimes in order to take away their voting rights. Have you looked at the statistics about how people in prisons are still counted as like being in that state? So there are allotted representatives in the House of Representatives despite not being able to vote, exactly like in the 3/5 compromise. You should feel obligated to do everything in your power to vote because you have thousands of generations of people who fought for this right. You should feel obligated. You should look at every ancestor on your family tree. You should think about every ancestor you can't find on your family tree because they weren't considered human, and you should vote for them. And you should vote early. You should vote by mail. You should do everything possible to make sure that your ballot is counted, because if it isn't, then that's a vote that you didn't cast for all the women who fought for you to have it in the first place. I'm done talking now.
Would anyone like to go after her? I'm going to
I'm
kick it over to
telling you, I
Danielle.
was like, I don't know if I want to go after her, Laura, but that is amazing. And exactly why I do vote. I think that it's very important that we talk about early voting. These are not the times that this is just unprecedented times that we're living in. We're living in the midst of a pandemic. Things they may not be easy, but it's important that even if it's not easy for us to vote, that we still do. So and you asked why it's important to plan, because again, we know the dirty tricks. We know that they're happening already. 4 days in, we're seeing a lot of these discriminatory practices that are happening. So it's very important that if you have to take the whole day, whatever you have to do to plan to be there, you can't be turned off by the lines. We have to stand in line as long as it takes for us to make our voices count, because again, we are not just voting for ourselves. We're voting for our ancestors. We're voting for our future. We're voting for everyone. So I think it's really important that we are planning, know exactly what day we're going. I think it's important that we have a backup day so that if something goes wrong on day number 1, we know that we can go day number 2. And I think that's extremely why it's extremely important to not wait until November, that we're getting out there now, just in case somebody tries to play some games and our vote can't get cast, that we can ensure that we have another opportunity for us to get back to the polls and vote. So I think that's why it's very important that we're planning, and of course it's important that we're getting as many people as we can. If we have to pick people up and drive them, whatever we need to do, I think it's important that we're having these conversations with our friends and family and not just thinking everybody's gonna vote. No. When are you voting? Like, I need to know, what day are you planning to vote? Do you want to go together? Do you have a ride to get there? We have to have the conversations. So, and I have had conversations with friends that I thought had good sense. And then in these conversations, they're telling me they don't plan on voting.
Yes.
No, we need to have a conversation about it.
Talk about it.
And so unless we are having the conversations with our friends and family, we don't really know where they are mentally. So it's important for us to start to have these open conversations with people and to talk about who are you voting for? Do you know? A lot of folks here in Tennessee, myself included, I moved here from Chicago 4 years ago, not knowing who to vote for. Who is this person? And so thanks to the voter guide that the Equity Alliance does, I'm now
Shout out
able
the Equity
to
Alliance.
go and say, okay, this is who they said I should be. Let me go and do some research, and find out. So I think it's been too many years of us just going in and Democrat, like we don't know who we're voting for. We're just hoping that they have our best interest at heart. And it's important that we take our voting into our own hands and that we start to do the research and show up informed at the polls.
Absolutely. And to that point, so I know that we already got on the topic of like voting in this election, but we actually have more questions in the comments than expected. So I'm actually going to kick it over to Sharizna, and we're going to revisit this conversation at the end because it's so important that we do talk about the nonpartisan voter guide and then also bringing out our people to the polls. And Sharizna, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. So I'm going to facilitate the Q&A from the audience, and we have a lot of audience questions. Before we get started, I want to bring Tamika in to talk a little bit about, I don't want us to assume that people know who Equity Alliance is. So will you come on and tell us a little bit about Equity Alliance and the voter guide? Because there is a question about how do we get information about the ballot? And so talk a little bit about who the Equity Alliance is and the voter guide. And then I'll invite others to share where else can people gain information about the ballot and why it's important for you to be educated about the ballot before going to the polls. Tamika.
Thank you. Again, so the Equity Alliance. The Equity Alliance is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is statewide, founded here in Metro Nashville, Davidson County, but expanding our efforts all over the state. So with that being said, we are nonpartisan civic organization, and we produce a voter guide. Our voter guide is to help make sure that you vote in confidence. So you want to go to the polls and be informed about the decisions that you are making that are going to affect children like mine and Laura on here, and everyone else's children. So we want to make sure that you make informed decisions when you are going to the polls. Our voter guide is definitely a great tool to use. We have produced it for the last, I believe, 3 years. The last 3 years, and we just expanded this year to other counties. So now we cover Nashville, Chattanooga, as well as Memphis. So if you are in those 3 cities, you can download our voter guide. The website to download, you can visit the Equity Alliance website, of course. And for the actual voter guide itself, it's tnvoterguides.com. And when you go there, you'll be able to download it to your phone, so you don't have to worry about taking the paper copy. If you choose not to, you can download it right to your smart device and take it to the polls with you, so you will make an informed decision. I know researching candidates is a lot, simply because it took a lot to put that guide together. But definitely for those of you who are going to the polls and take it to your friends. We have hard copies available as well for our older voters who don't have smart devices and like to have physical paper to reflect back to. But the voter guide is definitely an amazing tool to use. A lot of people chime in on our socials and say, hey, that voter guide is awesome. It helped me be able to make sure I made the right decision when I went to go vote. So I definitely would recommend you guys downloading it if you haven't already, and take it to the polls with you.
Awesome. Thank you. Last week, I am in New Jersey this week, and I was at my sister's house, Pastor Cummings, and she was filling out her mail-in ballot and speaking about voter suppression. She was, my sisters and I, we have multiple degrees. We are executive directors in our organizations. And my sister's reading this ballot, and one of the amendments, the way it's worded, right? We got multiple degrees in the house. We're reading this and we're like, what does this mean and how do I vote? So Pastor Cummings, talk a little bit about, right, the amendments, right? When we go and research these ballots, it's not just the candidates, right? But it's local issues that's affecting our community. And depending on how you vote, it has a huge impact. And sometimes the language is so problematic. So why should people be researching in the day of Google and information time? Pastor Cummings, come on and help our viewers understand why it's so important for us to be equipped to learn how to read the ballot before we get to the polls.
So that the reason it's important, Reverend Charisma, is so that on election day, my phone is not ringing off the hook. I guarantee you on election day,
Right.
my phone is ringing off the hook. You brought up a very important issue, and that's the language sometimes that is on the actual ballot, particularly around referendums. And you just have to know that's done purposefully. I can name a couple of referendums that we had here in Nashville, where if you don't read carefully or you haven't done your research, it's hidden in there and you end up voting for something that is really against your own self-interest. I'm excited. I'm always excited about the voter guide. I remember early on as a young woman voting and not really having that educational piece to know who to vote for and just hoping that you voted for the right person. But those days are over. As Reverend Charisma says, you have the voter guide, but you also have Google. And you can also look particularly for those incumbents who are running again. Why should they get your vote again? Why should you be electing them, voting for them to go back to office to do some of the same things that they've done? So look at what their voting record is. All of that information is public information, and it's important information. And what we have happening here in Nashville, I know you all have noticed, is we have a lot of elected officials. They've held one position and they held that position for about 4, 6, 8 years. And then they'll run for another position. And then we vote for them again as if we owe them something. Well, we don't owe them anything. Look and see, how did they handle this other position? What kind of, what was their record with this other position before we just automatically vote for somebody just because we know their name? And that happens a lot too. We vote a lot by name recognition, and it's really time out for that, because we've got some names here in Nashville that are not good for us. They are not. I see you, Tamika. I hear you. They're absolutely not good for us. And I'm just shocked. I was just shocked in this last election, folk that got back in. Okay, so we've just got to do better. We have got to do better. Laura had put in the chat, I don't know if anybody said it, if you don't vote for anybody else, if you don't vote for your family tree, my great-great-grandparents were also slaves. But if you don't vote for them, vote for Laura, who cannot vote, because you have certainly learned something from her today.
That's right.
Amen.
That's right. Lindsay, I want to bring your voice in for the voter who goes into the polls and they have questions and don't always feel comfortable to ask the poll workers questions. Would you share with our voters their rights that they have there to be able to ask clarifying questions so that they're equipped to cast the vote that they really want to cast during election day or early voting? Lindsay.
Well, if you're going into the polls and you have any questions, the poll workers are literally there to help you. Like, a part of their job responsibility is to assist the voters. And you do not have to be ashamed. Literally, I'm so involved in the community, and sometimes I have a question. I'm like, what is this? Don't be shy. If you have a question about like the materials that you need, you could always look that up beforehand. What I like to tell people is to always be prepared, because you never know what you'll experience once you go into the polls, and you can't go back in. So like, it's a one-time thing. If you have a question about anything, Google it, ask a trusted source, go to the organizations that actually produce guides on these questions. You can also contact your elected officials, because they know the elections in and out. Like, there are so many different resources that we have. And then if you still have a question when you do get to the polls, specifically in Davidson County, the Davidson County Election Commission has done a great job of assisting voters while you are at the polls. And if you have a question and you don't want to get too close, that's also fine. I know that, yes, we are still in the middle of a global pandemic. So questions will arise when you go to the polls. They are there to help you. They'll also be in head to toe with PPE. So it'll be safe. There are sanitizing stations everywhere, but just don't be afraid to ask any questions whatsoever.
Thank you. There's so much questions from the audience. So I want to jump right in. And, we started this conversation about the ways in which Black women, right? Research shows that Black women vote with a moral conscience, and they are the moral compass of the world. Well, here's the question, and anyone can join in to answer this question. Will you speak to the burden women of color carry that accompanies being the moral choice and compass of the world? Would you speak to the burden that women of color carry? Yeah, Alora.
There's also a verse in my poem about this. Black womanhood is being asked to bring gifts to parties you were never invited to. It's lighting everyone's candle with the fire alight in you. It's standing in solidarity with women who didn't fight for you because you know what oppression feels like. I think that God just might love like Black women do.
We might need to hear that.
Y'all ready to shout yet?
I tell you, I am. I was shouting off of, your vote is the bullet in a semi-automatic, baby.
My God, my God.
Yes.
Someone else, the burden that women carry, Black women carry, going to the ballot, going to the polls, because we vote, right? Because it's almost like we're carrying everybody with us, right? And it's a burden, and our backs are breaking, right? So talk to the world, talk to our audience today about this burden and why it's important that, Black men join in that burden and carrying, and white women join in, white men, right? The Hispanic, Latino, and community. Why is it important that collectively as human beings we carry that burden? It should not just be Black
because
women.
Black women are exhausted. We are exhausted.
Yes.
We're gonna keep going because that's what we do. But we are exhausted, and we, in so many ways. And this year, I think we're more tired than we've ever been, and we would have been tired. And then it's George Floyd, and then there's a pandemic, and we were tired last year, and now we're even more exhausted this year. And we need for everyone to step up and help us to relieve some of that burden. So I think, again, Alora's words were perfect. But if I can speak for myself and most of the Black women that I know, we're going to keep on doing what we need to do for us, for our families, for our country. But we are exhausted, and we need the support and we need the help of everyone as we move forward in this country.
Yeah.
Go ahead, allow me to chime in. As I think about, I think it was mentioned earlier in our conversation about us living in such a individualistic society. And I thought about, feminism. When feminism came on the scene, it was really only concerned just about women, right? And that feminist thought, feminist theology, but there's a theology, womanist theology. I am not a womanist theologian, but I'm a student of womanist theology that talks about how Black women are not concerned just about women, but about the whole and about the entire family. So I think that goes back to us just being concerned about the village and making sure that our village is intact, and making sure that our village has what it needs. And so you're absolutely right, Danielle. It's a huge burden to carry. It's one that we continue to carry because we understand that it's not just about us, but it's about the collective. It's about making sure, Dawana, that everybody rises together in our village. And so I just wanted to put that thought in there, but to know that, yes, we're all in this together. This election is has been said to be, and I believe it to be, probably the most important election that our country has faced in a long, long time. And so that's why you see Black women out there carrying the signs and moving and shaking and organizing, because we have got to make sure that everybody gets to the poll, because we know how important it is. We understand that for some of us, this election is a matter of life and death.
Awesome.
I just have one comment.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. When we think about Black women marching and carrying signs, birthing movements, carrying movements, Fannie Lou Hamer, when we think about all of those things are killing us. They are literally killing us. And when I say us, I mean specifically Black women. And so when we talk about people needing to share this burden, it, for me, is that we are also, like other of the panelists have said, we are tired, we are worn out, and we're going to keep doing it. And so I can rely on all the women that I see on this screen. I can rely on my sister friends. I can rely on my church family and all of those folks, all of those women who will keep doing it. And it is killing us. And so when we were talking earlier about folks voting against their own best interests, own self-interest, we're working almost at times against our own as well. And so if other folks don't show up, we will continue to have to do these kinds of things. And so at a certain point, the fact that I can take a moment and take a step back and practice some self-care, knowing that another woman that I can trust, that has my heart and my interests and my family's interests at heart, will be standing in that gap, it means a lot. And I'm unwilling to allow it to continue. I'm unwilling to allow us Black women to continue to have to do it. And so we will continue to march, we will continue to do all those things, and we will continue to have expectations and hold accountable the other folks for joining us, because it's killing us. We cannot continue to do it all by ourselves.
Thank you. Tamika, I'm coming to you, but Danielle, you're next. This is about the Black agenda. And the question here from the audience speaks to, asks for us to speak to the patriarchy that exists in the traditional Black agenda. I want to take it further to talk about the ways in which the Black agenda is often about Black capitalism, and it does not speak to racial justice, right? And so Black capitalism. And so Danielle, there's this idea that the Black economy will save us. Right. And so entrepreneurship is the way. And I think for many who are called to that way, it's important, but it's not the answer or the final answer, the only answer in terms of what it means, right, to have a Black agenda. So Tamika, as an organizer, would you talk a little bit about the ways in which patriarchy is killing us when we come to the table to decide in terms of what the Black agenda is, right? But not just patriarch, it's connected to this idea, this false conception that Black capitalism will save us.
I think we have to, us as Black people, all get on the same page. What's on the Black agenda? Where, what, because we have some people that put themselves in different Black communities. So is the Black agenda serving us all as a whole?
Right.
Are you looking out for every Black person when you come to this table with a Black agenda? Are you looking out for a Danielle, who's a small business owner? Are you looking out for Miss Dewana, that's an executive director of a Black organization that serves Black children in Edge Hill, that have a safe place that they can walk over to? Are you looking out for the Black agenda that will service all of those other people in our community? So what is the Black, who is the Black agenda for? What's on it? And I need for us as Black people to get on the same page about when we're writing out this agenda. Is it going to better serve Reverend Cummings over at New Covenant in the middle of North Nashville, where the tornado came through and ripped almost every roof off of every house around her church? Lord, thank you for not letting the church get hit, but it affected everyone around her. So what's on the Black agenda? Who what are we doing to make sure that everyone has something on that agenda to make sure that we're all served?
Yeah. Danielle, would you talk a little bit about the Black agenda and the ways in which patriarchy is in the midst of it, right? It's at the heart of it. But part of the patriarchy is this misconception that Black capitalism, right, will save us.
Absolutely. I think that it's really, I think to piggyback on what Tamika was saying, that is this agenda reaching every area or every type of Black? Because again, a lot of us talk about how things impact our community and this middle classness that we talked about earlier. But how these people who are in North Nashville, in the hood, in the projects all over America, how do we ensure that this agenda reaches them? How do we ensure that these laws are impacting Black women and not just, and also, again, the LGBT community?
Right.
We can't just focus on, again, when we look at the capitalism and we look at who are these typically men that are in these positions that, are now these million and billionaires, and are the thing when they are speaking and they're talking about this Black agenda, are they speaking for Black women who are doing all the work, behind the scenes? So I think that it's really important that when we put these people in a position to speak for us as Black people, do they care about Black women? Do they care about the Black hood, the hood where they probably came from? Did they forget? Do they care about the LGBT community? It cannot be about Black men. It cannot just be about Black men. The Black agenda has to fit every Black person. And I think that it's important, like I said, that, like Tamika said, that we're not just talking about how this agenda works for those that have gone to school and, and have good jobs. We have to make sure that those that are never going to be able to have those opportunities are still spoken for. And I think that needs to be the primary objective of us coming together and having an agenda, that we can't focus on those of us that are doing all right. We have to make sure that those that are not in a position to pull themselves out of poverty are spoken for as well.
Laura, I see your hands, but I really want to move on just to tackle other questions from the audience. Speaking of the Black man, question from the audience comes: I have seen that Black men get a lot of hate. How do we make the system work for them? How do we make the system work for them? I don't think it's just Black men. I think oftentimes we prioritize, right? We prioritize Black men, but Black men, Black women, trans people, Black trans people are the most vulnerable in this country, are consistently being killed with no media coverage, right? And so the hate comes from every which way. And the hate is birthed out of white supremacist ideologies. And so how does the system work for us? How can the system work for us? Lindsay, I haven't heard your voice yet.
How can the system work for us? I would say us taking back our power and going out to vote. The people in power directly impact you, like from the policies that they make. There's a direct correlation. There are some people that say, like, well, voting isn't end all be all. And that is absolutely correct, because once those people get into power, we also need people holding our elected officials accountable. We need people that are actually developing policies. But for the most part, like, just voting right now, it's this close, like with this proximity to the election, like it is so important that we do understand the power in our voice. And you can't participate in a system that you are not a part of. You have to be a part of this democratic process in order to even have a say in how we can make change.
That's right. Thank you. Pastor Cummings, I want to bring your voice in. Earlier, you talked about this idea of us being able to hold our elected officials accountable, right? And so the urgency in this conversation is go vote. But that is not where we stop, right? We don't stop in just voting. That is definitely one of the ways the system can work for us, but it doesn't just work when we go to the polls. Talk a little bit, Pastor Cummings, about the importance after the vote, holding our elected officials accountable, whether we like them or not, whether we personally know them or not, whether they're popular in our community.
Whether we voted for them or not, right?
That's
Because
right.
at the end of the day, whether we vote for them or not, they still represent us. Let me just share an experience that I had. I was in Washington, D.C., meeting with our representatives here from the great state of Tennessee. We went to one particular senator's office. This was about health care. And this senator said to us, a contingency of us African Americans from the great state of Tennessee, I don't represent you. I'm not meeting with you. Do you understand what I'm saying? These are our tax dollars, whether we vote for these people or not. So one of the things that we have to do, how do we hold them accountable? Well, you know, we catalog what did they run on? What was their platform? What did they say that they were going to do? We monitor how they're voting, what their voting records are. Listen, I know, well, I've run for public office myself. I know that politicians pay attention to their constituents. They pay attention to every email that comes in, particularly when there's 100 emails saying the same thing, it's going to get their notice. So when people are sending out for you to sign on to this letter or to sign on to this petition, to grab our elected officials' attention, do it. It makes a huge difference. But then listen, they're not going to meet with you as an individual. That is just not going to happen. You've got to be connected to organizations that have that kind of power. I push Equity Alliance, I push NAACP. It is the oldest civil rights organization in this country. And whether the people listening and having respect for it, let me tell you, your elected officials do. I push NOAA, National Organized for Action and Hope, organizations, IMF, the Interdenominational Ministers Fellowship, who are meeting with these people in between the elections. You need to connect with some of those folks. So that's how you're gonna be able to continue to have them in conversation. You just picking up the phone, calling them, it's not, I'm telling you, it's not gonna happen. Been there, done that. You're on mute.
I'm muted. Danielle, there's a lot of questions about business owners, right? And so the first question is around kind of the interest in voting for those candidates who tend to supposedly be pro-business. Is there a tendency for some business owners to vote pro-business candidates in thinking the tax cuts, fighting against living wages, right to work laws, et cetera, be protected, better protect them, even in light of the other issues those candidates are against, are the very things our community needs? Would you speak to that, Danielle? And anyone else can chime.
Absolutely. A very high percentage of business owners vote based on their wallet. And I think that, again, that's where Black women, where we differ, because even as a business owner, it can't be all about my bottom line. And I think this year is even more important that we have those conversations, because our economy has been impacted so much by this pandemic. And so it is definitely likely for business owners, the number one thing the business owners vote based on are taxes. And so you're voting not based on your neighborhood and those around you, based on your business and how the taxes will impact your business. And I think that it's important that we do have a conversation around that, because it cannot just be about your bottom line. As you think about your neighbors, let's think about how violence can impact your business, right? How looting can impact your business and these type of things. So we have to, as business owners, we have to care about more than just the bottom line in our wallets when we're voting. We are people at the end of the day. We have families at the end of the day. So while it's important that we vote in our businesses are definitely have to be a priority as a business owner, but it can't be the end all be all as we go to the polls as business owners.
Laura, let me bring your voice. You've been trying to chime in for a minute now.
Hi. My father is a small business owner, so I am very passionate about this topic. And I just want to say, I think it's functionally incompetent to presume that you're a business owner before you're Black. Okay? And it's just, you have to think about it this way. You as a Black person in American society cannot go your entire life without interacting with white people. A white person in American society could live their entire life and never see a Black person, which means that you as a Black business owner will always have interactions with white business owners who may get loans before you, will have competing businesses that will have more success because they appeal to a different demographic of people who often have more purchasing power in our country, which is a sad but true notion. And I think that you as a Black person in this country have to understand that in order for your business to gain equal playing field with white business owners, you have to vote as a Black person first. You have to vote with your community in mind, because when you raise up the Black community, you raise up the purchasing power of the Black community. And you may get a tax cut today, but those Black people are still going to be there and their money is still not going to be as good tomorrow. And that is the people who are going to buy your products, those Black people, those minorities, that neighborhood you came up in, because those white people, that's who's buying their products, their community, the people in the neighborhood they came up in, because their small business has purchasing power because it has a community that has purchasing power. You are responsible for ensuring the purchasing power of your community before you ensure that that community over there that already has the money will be able to get a tax cut. Because that tax cut is not going to help you as much when your community does not have the ability to progress. You have seen the amazing power Black communities and Black businesses can have when they are given the opportunity. But you've also seen Tulsa, Rosewood, how when Black communities are given purchasing power, they're burned down. Build up your community first. Build up your power first. Build up your education first. Then you can think about tax cuts.
Thank you. Vote like the Black woman, moral consciousness and the community impact. I'm going to invite you all to share your last closing words for our audience as we depart this place. Your last closing words. Danielle Mcgee, let me start with you. Your last closing words for our viewers this afternoon as it relates to this conversation. Vote as a Black woman, moral consciousness and community impact.
Absolutely. I first want to thank you so much for having me. This was amazing. I learned so much, so enlightening to be here today. So I wanted to say that. I encourage everyone to vote like a Black woman, but to live every day like a Black woman and thinking about your neighbor, loving our neighbors and being mindful of how we together are stronger. So I think that it's just important that we think about the strength in our communities as we move forward in voting, hopefully early. Make sure that you're planning to get to the polls and that you're doing your research before you get there. Thanks so much, Charisma.
Thank you, Danielle Mcgee. Tamika White, would you share with us your closing words as it relates to moral consciousness and the community impact? Vote like a Black woman. And Danielle challenged us to not just vote like a Black woman, but to live like a Black woman. Come on, Tamika White, and share your closing words.
I encourage everyone to vote like a Black woman. I encourage everyone to make a plan. That's the advantage you have of voting early. You can go anywhere. Everybody can. So make it a party. Take a family friend. Take your kids with you so they can see what voting will be like when they are of age to go. We are 4 days into early voting. Tomorrow starts day 5. We are witnessing record numbers at the ballot boxes across the state of Tennessee. If you guys didn't see the report, over 4.4 million people registered this cycle. There are going to be tremendous amounts of people trying to vote because we are voting like our lives depend on it. I encourage you to make an informed decision before you go to the polls. Name recognition ain't going to continue to cut it here. It's time out for that. We have voted for too long and haven't gotten anywhere off of name recognition. So vote in confidence. Download the voter guide, TennesseeVoterGuides.com. It services Nashville, Chattanooga, and Memphis. Voting is our right. Voting is our voice, and there is power in voting. Thank you.
Tamika White with Equity Alliance, the Tennessee Voter Guide. She said, voting is our right. It is our power, our voice, and we will get nowhere if we don't vote. Thank you, Tamika White, for being with us and offering those words. Dewana Wade, won't you share your closing remarks as it relates to this conversation about moral consciousness and the community impact as it relates to voting?
I'm going to keep it very brief because I agree with everything that's already been said in the closing remarks. But two things. My favorite Kwanzaa principle is Kuji Chagalia, self-determination. And I think about that when I think about going to the polls. What I want for me, I want for you. And you and me, we are way too important, way too necessary, way too worthy to not vote. Go out and vote so that you can self-determine what's coming next for you and yours.
Dewana Wade with our Kwanzaa principle, Kuji Chakali. It's one of my favorite ones too, as well. Thank you, Dewana, for those words. And my pastor, I'm always excited to hear my pastor, because when you hear her, you don't just hear a word. You know, she ain't just bringing words. She brings the word with lots of passion and love for the people. And you can be with the people and not love them. You can be with the people and not love them, but I am so grateful to have a pastor leader who look like the people, smell like the people, act like the people, because she absolutely loves the people. Reverend Dr. Judy Cummings, won't you share your closing remarks in this space before we leave?
Thank you so much. And it's just been my honor to be with such a powerful panel of women. You know, if your vote was not important, if your vote really didn't matter, just think about it. There would not be the power behind voter suppression. Voter suppression is not new. It's been going on for a while. I've been talking about voter suppression since 2008. You remember what happened in 2008. It was required that you have your driver's license to go, without any thought about people who didn't have a driver's license. Well, who were the people who didn't have a driver's license? It was a lot of our people, because you see, they had been caught up in the criminal injustice system, and they knew this. So understand that your vote is important. If it wasn't, you wouldn't have all of these campaigns out to keep you from voting. Vote like your life depends on it, because at the end of the day, what you have witnessed throughout this coronavirus pandemic is that your life does indeed depend on it. So vote early, vote an educated vote, do your research, do your homework, call somebody. Don't go to the polls by yourself, take somebody with you. Again, thank you. It's been my honor. It's been my pleasure. God bless you all.
The Reverend Dr. Judy Cummings, who tells us, when you cast your vote, let it be an educated one. In other words, do your research before you get to the polls. Thank you, Pastor Cummings. Lindsay Smith, who is my mentor and also the moderator for today. Lindsay, won't you share your last closing remarks for us as we leave this space as it relates to moral consciousness and the community impact as it relates to voting?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was an amazing panel. Can't wait to go back and watch the rerun when I am chilling later on. But if anyone in the audience didn't hear it already, vote like a Black woman. We will not lead you astray. We are here. We are your moral compass. Like the burden, it shouldn't just be on us, but just vote like a Black woman. And then also vote early. It's super important. Again, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and it's so important that we keep each and every one of us safe. Voting is something that should be safe and fun and healthy. And that's why I am participating in an early voting initiative where we're making it super fun for people to pick a day, adopt it, and go out and bring everyone in their community and make it celebratory and less obligatory. Everyone, if you want to go to bit.ly/vote-early-TN, follow us on the social media channels. We also have early voting information. If you're in Davidson County, there are 13 satellite early voting locations that you can go to choose from. That is amazing. Early voting, it is now and until Thursday, Thursday, October 29th. So make that plan, get out to the polls and vote early and keep yourself safe and make sure that you, your friends, and your family all have a plan to get out to the polls because our life depends on it this year.
Lindsay Smith reminding us to not go to the polls alone, but to go with family and friends because our life depends on it. Thank you all so much for being with us. I hope this was impactful for you. I hope this was educating conversation for you as you prepare yourselves for the ballot. This is a reminder that you don't just think about who's on the ballot, but you're also mindful of what's on the ballot, not just the candidates, but what referendum, what amendment that's on the ballot that impacts your local community, a decision that you have to make. And as everyone said, this election is life or death. Every election is life or death. National election, the local election, life or death. And literally, we have the power to live when we go cast our vote. So I want to invite you to be a co-conspirator with us, to go out, early vote, bring your family and friends, and go cast an educated vote. As we leave this place, I want to invite the beautiful, the wonderful, the passionate Alora Young. Alora, in the comments in the section, we're already running your campaign for presidency. You're not even old enough to run to vote, but we're ready for you to run for office, my sister. We're so grateful for you. And you bring so much gifts and talents, and we just want to make space for that because we believe you are our future and we celebrate you as our future. So we hold this space for you as you come. We close this space with a poem from the Alora Young.
Hey, I'm Alora, and this has been an amazing, incredible experience. Do I have time to read the whole poem or should I just read the last verse?
The whole poem, sis. We got
Whole
space
poem?
for you.
Okay, cool. This piece is called To Have a Name, and hopefully my parents will be quiet enough in the background for me to get through it. Hi, love you guys. Okay. I wonder if a mother's love can be found on the second X chromosome. If God built a womb as a portal from heaven's own, if Eve could have known that womanhood was a power that God never wanted to be revealed. But the forbidden fruit sowed Eden into our DNA. I wonder if Claudette Colvin knew that something as simple as refusing to rise could incite something prophesized in Negro hymns for centuries. If she knew her revolutionary movement would live in the shadow of Rosa Parks' memory. Black womanhood is being asked to bring gifts to parties you were never invited to. It's lighting everyone's candle with a fire alight in you. It's standing in solidarity with women who didn't fight for you because you know what oppression feels like. And I think that God just might love like Black women do. My great-great-grandmother was a slave. She took thoughts of freedom to her unmarked grave. Her daughter stood alongside sisters for rights that would never be hers in a lifetime. Revolution is embedded in my bloodline. She couldn't have dreamed what the next century brought in the law in the hands of Justice Jane Boleyn, the first judge in this country to be a Black woman, changing a future she would never see. Every vote we cast should honor her memory. Cast that ballot like that candle burning with ancestral flame. It's the legacy they fought for. Let them see what became of the children, of the country, of the women who got the chance to have a name. If words are bullets, then your ballot is a semi-automatic. It's the way your voice can shoot through the silence and the static. If the sealing of your lips is far more than systematic, look back at all the women who wielded their weapons for you. This holiday is an empty promise if we don't use it to see there's more to our mission. Look at Atlanta's lines, voting booths with locked shut doors by governors with flimsy spines. My people who can't vote for nonviolent crimes committed back in '99. I watched my sister's best friends go to prison. I watched the boys I saw become men, become felons, and lose every right our ancestors fought for. I see pictures of today's suppressed voters in Black and white, so people still think this is history. It's not my tomorrow I'm fighting for. It's my daughter's. I'll stand guard at her door as grandma waded in the waters. Every vote is hope that no more of my blood will lie in unmarked graves. It's the hope that my babies will always be called by their names. Burn your textbooks if they tell you there's nothing more to change. Women the world has tried to silence are women who know what needs repair. Shirley Chisholm said, if they don't give you a seat, bring a folding chair. For Black women, this privilege has not been here for 100 years. But when it comes to revolution, ask Eartha, Angela. We have always been the pioneers. The love my great-great-grandmother held for me from past afar was strong because it drew its power from and burned just like the nearest star. From Malala to Asada, from the classroom to the polls, womanhood and the sun's fire reside inside our souls. That through every election and the world we change in kind, the garden in our bodies will find solace in our minds, and the waters that we waded in bring joy in gentler times. That my daughter has the future Eve and every other mother dreams, that Eden will be home again and America will be redeemed. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you, Alora Young. There is no words. We leave this place reminding you all, vote like a Black woman, moral consciousness and community impact. Goodbye. Have a great one. God bless you. See you next week. Bye-bye.